"You have no right," Amos Reed thundered, his voice cracking as the Coast Guard towed the Tide's Oath out of Biloxi Harbor. The fog wrapped around the white-haired old man, as if trying to hide the searing pain in his chest. That battered vessel was not just home, it was where Amos had buried memories of storm-racked nights and the oath he would never break. When his sleeve slipped down, the compass tattoo, R7 to 89, flashed into view, like a lighthouse at the heart of the tempest. What secret led him to be so dismissed? The journey of a forgotten hero begins here. Like, share, and join the discovery. All right, my dear viewers, get ready for a tale that will leave you speechless. Take a second to like the video and subscribe, and drop a comment below to let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always thrilling to see people joining us from all corners of the globe. Mist clung to the Biloxi Harbor, wrapping around Amos Reed's shoulders like nameless memories, heavy and cold. He stood silently at the dock, his sinewy hands deftly fastening lines to the Tide's Oath, the sailboat he had hand-built 30 years ago, now peeling and listing like his own life. Every crack in the wood held a story, every length of rope a vow he had never broken. Amos lived quietly, day after day, mending nets for fishermen, ferrying tourists to watch the sunrise's deep blue eyes always fixed on the sea, where his memories lay buried beneath the waves. To strangers, he was merely an eccentric old man, a pale silhouette beside a vessel barely seaworthy. The steady slap of waves mixed with the briny breath of the ocean, but this morning's air was heavier than usual. Amos felt it then, just as he once sensed storms brewing from afar. A chill wind swept across, causing the frayed fabric of his coat to flutter. He halted, his thumb tracing the rope as if holding onto a fragile life. Suddenly, the roar of engines shattered the stillness. 3 Coast Guard patrol boats cut through the water, circling the Tide's Oath like predatory sharks. Spray splashed onto Amos's worn shoes, but he did not flinchingly lifted his head, his gaze sharp as he watched the figure stepping down from the lead craft. Lieutenant Ethan Shaw, young and rigid in his uniform, set foot on the dock. His eyes scanned Amos, paused for a moment on the white hair and tattered clothes, then slid by as if the old man were unworthy of notice. Shaw's voice rang out, cold as a blade through the fog. "Mr. Reed, this vessel is being seized on suspicion of illicit activity, based on an anonymous tip about contraband." Amos straightened, knuckles whitening as he gripped the line. A familiar flame flared within his chest, tempered by the armor of his silence. He wanted to roar that they were wrong, that the Tide's Oath was more than a boutique, was his home, the final harbor of his years of sacrifice. But his words caught in his clenched jaw, and instead came a hoarse reply, like breaking waves. They were mistaken. This was his entire life. His protest was drowned out by the clamor of the boarding party. Coast Guard officers swarmed the deck, overturning lockers, inspecting every corner. On the pier, a crowd gathered. A fisherman whose nets Amos had mended shook his head and whispered to a neighbor that the old man was always taciturn, surely up to no good. A tourist raised her phone, mocking as she photographed the listing vessel. How can that even float? Their murmurs stung like salt on an old wound, but Amos would not meet their eyes. He stood there, shoulders stooped, watching the Tide's Oath being hauled away, as though a fragment of his soul were being torn off. In that moment, as he gripped the railing, his worn sleeve slipped back. A tattoo appeared on his wrist, a meticulously etched compass marked R7 to 89. Faded but precise, like a lighthouse standing silent amid the storm. Lieutenant Shaw caught sight of it but merely glanced away, curiosity absent, as if it were meaningless ink on an old man's skin. He gave the order to pull away, his tone steady, devoid of hesitation. Amos released the railing, his hand trembling. He whispered, as though speaking to the sea itself, "They know nothing." That tattoo, like a silent wave, carried the secret of a hero erased from history, a story Biloxi's harbor was not yet ready to hear. Amos Reed stood silently at the Biloxi harbor, his sinewy hands hanging loose, his gaze fixed on the empty space where the Tide's Oath had just been towed away. The Coast Guard engines had receded into the distance, yet in his chest a decades-old wound bled anew, as if his entire life had been ripped apart. That boat was more than a dwelling, it was a silent treasury, where he had interred the days he spent in the U.S. Navy, the moments he faced death when no one remembered. The system, with ruthless indifference, had erased his records, as though Amos had never shouldered a rifle or stood on the threshold of life and death. His memories surged back, sharp as a blade. In 1989, at age 35, Amos commanded a rescue vessel during Operation Railbreak, a top-secret mission off the Gulf of Mexico. That night, a storm howled, dragging a SEAL team into its deadly vortex. Their ship laden with crucial military documents became trapped in the maelstrom. Amos, with steely eyes and sure hands, steered his small rescue boat through towering walls of water. One by one, he brought 8 SEALs and Marines aboard, his calm voice rising above the screaming gale, pulling them back from the jaws of death. His actions not only saved lives but protected vital secrets from enemy hands. Yet when the storm cleared, every trace was expunged. No medals, no honorsomely the R7-89 compass tattoo he had carved on his wrist, a mute oath, leave no one behind. Upon leaving the service, Amos entered a different battlefield zone, invisible and unforgiving. The Veterans Administration, buried under stacks of paperwork, denied him support with the verdict, no records found. He stood before their desk, fists clenched, eyes dimming as he heard the verdict slice through him. In the system's eyes, he did not exist. In Biloxi, his chosen home port, people looked at him with indifference or contempt. To them, Amos was a useless old man, a taciturn shadow by the docks, living as though he belonged nowhere. Every glance, every whisper behind his back salted his old wound. But Amos did not let that pain blaze into a fire of bitterness. He buried it deep within, beneath the armor of his silence, where the memory of Railbreak still burned quietly. Amos refused to let that flame of loyalty die. He kept it alive in small ways. Each morning, he taught the harbor children to tie knots in rope, patiently guiding their hands to make each hitch secure, just as he had once kept his comrades from drifting away. He mended nets for fishermen, his hands slow but precise, as if every stitch were a reminder of those stormy nights. These acts brought him neither money nor recognition, but they linked him to the vow he once made. Sometimes, when the children laughed around him, Amos glimpsed their bright eyes, and those moments soothed the loneliness that gnawed at him each night. Yet even then, he could not shake the emptiness, the feeling of a hero the world had turned its back on. The pain of being forgotten never left Amos. It clung to him like a shadow, threading its way into his dreams, where he saw the faces of his teammates and heard the wind roar again through the railbreak night. But he did not flee from it. Instead, he embraced it just as he embraced the tide's oath and the R7-89 tattoo on his wrist. It was the sole proof that he had once been part of something vast, that he had kept his promise though no one knew. And in that silence, Amos continued on, carrying a legacy the world was not yet ready to hear. Days passed slowly since the tide's oath was towed from Biloxi harbor, leaving Amos Reed with a cold void in his chest, as if part of his soul had been imprisoned. He continued silently mending nets at the docks, his sinewy hands working as a ritual to soothe the pain of being forgotten. Yet his deep blue eyes always bore the memory of Railbreak, the stormy nights, when he had led his comrades past death's door. That morning, a sudden tempest crashed in, howling as though intent on tearing the harbor apart. Children's cries for help rang out from Dock 9, where a school group on a field trip was stranded. Those screams pierced Amos's heart and rekindled the flame of loyalty he had thought extinguished. Within Amos, an emotion surged, intense and painful. The children's pleas were more than sounds. They were a call from the past, from the faces of teammates he had once hauled back from the brink. He leapt to his feet, fear flickering for an instant before instinct shaped by the darkest nights took control. Without hesitation, Amos sprinted toward an old fishing skiff, its rusted engine whining for rest. A young fisherman named Caleb, whom Amos had once taught rope work, raced after him, concern and resolve shining in his eyes. "Let me help, sir." Amos nodded, his heart warming at this unexpected companionship, as if an old comrade had returned. As they pushed the boat off the pier, Amos felt his heart pounding not with fear, but with clarity the sensation of a soldier returning to the battlefield. He gripped the tiller, his hands steady as they had been 30 years before, his gaze razor-sharp as he scanned the swirling water. In that moment, he was no longer the dismissed old man, but the commander of Railbreak, the one who never abandoned a soul. The erasure inflicted by the system, and the scorn of society transformed into strength, propelling him toward Dock 9, where the children awaited in desperation. When they arrived, Amos spotted a boy clinging to a wooden post, face streaked with tears, whispering that he couldn't swim. Amos's heart clenched, as though seeing his own team member in that boy, swept away by the storm in years past. He knelt, his voice warm and steady, a promise. "Hold on to me, son. This storm won't win." The boy gripped Amos's hand, and Amos felt that fragile trust ignite a fire warming his chilled spirit. For 30 tense minutes, he and Caleb hauled each child aboard in turn, Amos at the helm, every maneuver affirming that he remained the hero of yesteryear. Every safe face was a victory, soothing the wound carved into him by neglect. When the last child set foot on solid ground, the crowd applauded, but Amos did not hear it. He stepped off the boat, shoulders stooped, feeling a heavy blend of relief and loneliness. He did not need thanks. This act was to keep his oath, not to earn recognition. Yet then a little girl, Lily, ran up and took his hand, curiosity shining in her eyes. She pointed to the R7-89 tattoo on his wrist and asked what it meant. Amos forced a sad smile, one that held both pride and pain. Just an old promise. He turned away, unaware that Lily had snapped a photo of the tattoo and posted it on TikTok with the caption, "The old man who saved us?" In that moment, Amos remained the silent hero, but the light from his deed had begun to breach the armor of silence he had worn for 30 years. Dear viewers, please relax for a moment, or grab a glass of water, then stay tuned. The story holds more surprises ahead. Comment 1 if you enjoyed this tale, so we know you're still here. The image of the compass tattoo, R7-89, on Amos Reed's wrist posted by little Lily on TikTok spread like wildfire across a parched field. In 2 days, the video amassed millions of views, and comments poured in from all over America, from admiration to curiosity about the old man who saved those children during the Biloxi storm. At Coast Guard headquarters, Lieutenant Ethan Shaw sat before his screen, eyes glued to the footage, brow furrowed. That tattoo flickered through his memory, a detail he had glanced over when he ordered the Tide's oath seized. A wave of unease washed over him, as though he had inadvertently trampled on something sacred. Shaw could not shake the image of Amos' deep, resolute blue eye sand, the hoarse voice declaring that the boat was his entire life. Had he been wrong? Curiosity led Shaw to Colonel Marcus Thorne, a Navy veteran with silvered hair and battle-worn eyes. Thorne had long heard whispered tales of Operation Railbreak, the top-secret 1989 mission he suspected hid a forgotten hero. When Shaw mentioned R7-89, Thorne froze, as though an old puzzle piece had fallen into place. "That was the rescue team's code," he whispered, voice trembling. "The man with that tattoo is a legend." In Thorne's chest, a spark of curiosity ignited alongside newfound respect for someone history had cast aside. Thorne plunged into the Navy archives, where dust-laden steel shelves concealed decades of secrets. After hours of digging, he unearthed an old steel box, its lock rusted shut as if time had sealed it away. Inside lay a cassette tape, its faded handwritten label reading, "Railbreak, 1989. When Thorne pressed play, Amos's calm voice cut through the roar of wind. "Boat 3, hold position. I'm on my way, no one left behind." The 3-minute recording captured Amos skillfully guiding 8 SEALs and Marines aboard his rescue craft, safeguarding critical documents from the century's fiercest storm. But what took Thorne's breath away was an encrypted report tucked inside the box, verifying that Amos had refused any metal so as not to compromise the mission, an act of selfless sacrifice no one ever knew. Thorne brought the recording to Shaw. In the cramped office, Amos's voice filling the air, Shaw bowed his head, fingers clenched on the desk. Each word on that tape felt like a hammer blow to his pride. The man he had deemed a smuggler and ordered his life dragged away was in fact the hero who saved his comrades on the darkest night. "We were wrong," Shaw whispered, voice thick. "He isn't a smuggler, he's a hero." Regret swelled in him, mingled with reverence for the man he had once dismissed. Thorne did not stop there. He posted the recording on X, along with Amos's story and the R7-89 tattoo. The post exploded, spreading to YouTube and TikTok, reaching 5 million views in 3 days. Each share became an unspoken apology, each comment a beam of light illuminating a buried legacy. In Biloxi, where locals once whispered behind Amos's back, a hush fell. A fisherman who had mocked him stood alone on the docks, eyes downcast, murmuring to himself, "I'm not worthy to look at him." In that moment, shame mingled with awe in his heart, as though Amos had become a lighthouse piercing the darkness of prejudice. The story of Amos Reed, rekindled by Lily's TikTok post and the Railbreak cassette, has not closed but continues to open new chapters like a forgotten book unearthed from the dust of time. When the Tide's oath was returned, the Coast Guard officers now bearing a respect born of the recording inspected the vessel's hold with unusual care. A young officer, running his hand over the old coils of rope, discovered a small wooden box, worn and rusted, tucked into a corner. Inside lay a leather-bound journal, its cover embossed with the characters R7-89 in resolute script and unspoken oath. The journal, like a compass of the soul, bore Amos's handwriting, recounting days the world had deliberately erased. Every line was a fragment of memory from Operation Railbreak, in 1989 harsh training days, nights of raging storms, and the moment Amos rescued 8 SEALs and Marines from death's doorstep. But what gripped the reader's heart most were his words about refusing a medal. "Honor does not lie in the eyes of others. It is the vow we keep in our hearts." In Amos's writing, there was no place for glory. He chose to protect his comrades' secrets, even at the cost of being invisible to history. The journal, like a fire burning quietly, illuminated the loyalty he had carried for 3 decades, despite scornful glances and the system's cold indifference. The journal was delivered to the Biloxi Maritime Museum, where former SEAL veterans, those who had whispered about Railbreak, gathered in a small room. One veteran, his voice trembling, read aloud Amos's words to the audience. The crowd fell silent when an unexpected detail emerged. Amos had quietly donated the majority of his military pay to the families of fallen comrades, even as he himself lived frugally, sometimes affording nothing more than a loaf of bread. Tears welled in the listeners' eyes, their hearts moved by the sacrifice of a man once deemed worthless. A video of the reading, posted to YouTube, garnered 2 million views in just a few days. Each view a heartbeat of gratitude for Amos's legacy. Lieutenant Ethan Shawth, very man who had ordered the Tide's oath seized, could not remain outside this whirlwind of emotion. The journal acted like a mirror, reflecting his own mistake, melting his once stiff pride into a river of remorse. He sought out Amos at the dock, where the old man still sat mending nets, his deep blue eyes steadfast. Shaw stood before him, eyes reddened, voice wavering. "Mr. Reed, I'm sorry." In his heart, shame mingled with respect, as though he faced a mountain he had once mistaken for dust. Amos looked up, harboring no trace of resentment, and gently patted Shaw's shoulder, his voice low. "You were doing your duty. So was I." That moment, simple, yet profound, served as a bridge across the chasm of prejudice, linking error to forgiveness. 2 weeks after the moment of forgiveness between Amos Reed and Lieutenant Shaw, Biloxi Harbor took on a solemn air, as if the sea itself had hushed in tribute. A modest yet deeply meaningful ceremony was held to honor Amos, attended by a few hundred townspeople, fishermen, and veterans gathered along the dock. Colonel Marcus Thornahis, silver hair gleaming in the sunlight, stood on a simple wooden platform beside 5 former SEALs who had survived thanks to Amos during Operation Railbreak in 1989. With a deep, resonant voice and eyes alight with respect, Thorne began to tell Amos's story. "He didn't just save us from the storm," he said, voice catching. "He also saved our faith in honor, in the vows that none but he ever witnessed." To Thorne, each word was a gesture of gratitude, an effort to restore light to a hero the world had long forgotten. When Thorne stepped down, he rendered a slow, solemn military salute to Amos. Seated on a wooden chair, Amos's sinewy hands were clasped tightly, his deep blue eyes shining with emotion. Warm feelings rose within him, not for recognition, but because his old comrades stood before him as living proof that the vow, "Leave no one behind," had been kept in full. The crowd fell silent, then erupted into applause, a sound like the heartbeat of Biloxi Harbor, filled with regret and gratitude. In their hearts, from fishermen who once whispered behind his back to tourists who once mocked him, a quiet awakening spread, as though they had just reclaimed a lost piece of their shared memory. The Coast Guard returned the tide's oath, and the Biloxi communal by those who once looked down on Amos restored it as a floating memorial named Reed's Resolve. A coastal road was renamed Amos Reed Way, a promise that his name would never be forgotten. When offered Biloxi's Medal of Honor, Amos declined, his voice low but firm. "A medal does not make a hero. Teach the children to keep their promises." To him, this recognition was not a reward but a gentle burden, a reminder that true legacy lies in the generations to come. The railbreak recording, the R7-89 journal, and the video of Amos rescuing the students continued to spread, reaching 15 million views during Memorial Day week, as America bowed its head to its soldiers. Biloxi's children, with innocent crayons, drew the tide's oath, transforming it into a symbol of loyalty. The Biloxi Maritime Museum opened an exhibition on Operation Railbreak, displaying Amos's journal entries, each line a bridge between past and present. Lily, the girl who photographed the R7-89 compass, became a volunteer, proudly sharing Amos's story with visitors. In her heart, Amos was not only her rescuer but a lesson that loyalty can change an entire community. Amos Reed's legacy is not merely the tale of a hero conquering the storm, but a persistent wind that stirred the hearts of the indifferent, rekindling faith in simple, enduring truths. Standing at the harbor, watching the children paint, Amos felt a quiet peace wash over him. He needed no medals or glory. For him, each child's smile, each nod from a fisherman, proved that his old vow had blossomed not on carved stone, but in growing souls. Biloxi Harbor, once cold to him, now embraced him like a father, and Amos, with hands still mending nets, felt the warmth of a family he never knew he had. Amos Reed's story reminds us that honor lies not in medals or glory, but in silent vows and loyalties that weather the storms of oblivion. From a dismissed old man at Biloxi's docks, Amos became that steady wind, inspiring faith in truth and compassion. His example heals us, reminding us that each small act, each forgiveness, can sow the seeds of an enduring legacy. Today, take a moment to honor the silent heroes around you, veterans who keep their promises though no one watches. Thank you, viewers in the United States, for journeying with this story. Don't forget to let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always a joy to see people joining us from all corners of the globe. Comment 1 if you enjoyed this tale, so we can continue bringing you even more great stories.